The next up is Willi Brammertz, and I really want to say two things by way of introduction to his presentation. The first is the foundation of ACTUS comes from the dissertation and subsequent development of Willi Brammertz's understanding of the centrality of financial contracts in the financial world, and the fact that when you abstract from all the legal and other aspects associated with financial instruments and you focus on the cash flow, it turns out a lot of differences drop away, and it's why the ACTA standard can represent virtually everything in general use today with about less than 36 contract types or algorithms. The second thing is I want to sort of frame what Willi's going to present, because he's going to present a presentation on dynamic analysis or dynamic simulation. And I want to state very clearly what the difference between that is and what was generally presented up to this point with respect to risk analytics using the ACTUS standard. If you take an existing portfolio and you do analysis on it by representing it in ACTUS and then interfacing with risk models, what you are in effect doing is taking a look at the liquidation value of the balance sheet or the liquidation value of the firm. Basically, the instruments run off over time. In order to do dynamic simulation, where in fact as things run off, you put new assets or new liabilities on your balance sheet, you have to engage a whole different and much more complex set of considerations that go into the dynamic simulation. And that's going to be the unique contribution of this presentation by Willi.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So first of all, I will talk about temporal modes of financial reporting. That's exactly what Alan now addressed already. I get some more details there. And then we talk about dynamic simulation. Why not taking Excel? You know, Excel is doing all the kinds of things, and why Excel fails there. Then there's another intermediate step. What are we really forecasting? You know, so what are we forecasting and what are we deriving? And then I will go into the practice of dynamic simulation, you know, how that looks like, the calculations, what you're doing, of course, in a simple way. And then I make the bridge to forecasting in practice. Actually, there will be a presentation right after lunch where you will see then what I explain now more in theoretical way, how it's done really in practice. You will see a dynamic simulation. Yeah, let's go to the temporal modes. So, from the analytic perspective, we have 4 temporal modes, you could say. You have on one hand the historic, you know, what has been in past, and then you're today, so what you look at present, so that's end of day. Then you have what we call static what if Monte Carlo. Much about risk management is actually about this static what if. And then we have dynamic what if, so what I want to go to explain. So let's show you some detail here. So let's assume we are here at T0 today, and we have assets and liabilities. We also have off-balance sheet, but you can imagine them inside the asset and the liabilities. So what happens is these contracts will run off over time, also as Alan explained them. And what we take an observed market. So let's take the yield curve of today, and that's all we need here. So from this, we can then derive value at T0, a balance sheet of all the positions, and we see the liquidity flows here. And that is called the liquidation view. So you look at the portfolio, you look at it to the end of the day, and you don't care about the future. So that's the end of day. And if you historize it every day, you get historic. So that is basically just the historizing nicely over time. Okay, so then static what if. We look at the same portfolio here, the same runoff, so nothing changes there. What changes, however, in this kind of analysis is the market condition. You look at some kind of volatility in the market and you make shocks. If you make a few, you call it stress scenario. If a machine creates a lot, in some risk model type, then you talk about Monte Carlo. So that is what we call static analysis, static what if. So the position is still today. And the markets, they are moved spastically, kind of. They don't really move in time. Actually, it's a little contradiction. So nothing moves if time doesn't move. But that's what is mainly risk management is a lot about that. So what you get then is a kind of distribution of value. And you get measures like value at risk, expected shortfall, all these kind of measures which you get out of this. So what we want to get at is now dynamic simulation. So dynamic starts again with the same data. So today we have a lot of future in today's balance sheet. If you have long-term like Silicon Valley, where they had a lot of future only on the asset side. So that was the thing here then. But it's all the future which you have there. But it's run off. And now we assume that when contracts come back, we will re-employ that. So banks are very happy, money comes back, but at the same time unhappy because they have to do again something. So they have to invest it again into new things. So the balance sheet grows over time here, and now you forecast markets over time. Before we just shifted them around instantaneously. So now we forecast them over time, and we have to create a link between the contracts which we create and the market conditions, which is a spread here, which goes also into the contract because that will determine the income and also the cash flows of the future. And then you will have a balance sheet over time, you have a P&L over time, you change the market conditions, you get another balance sheet, another P&L, etc., etc. So this is what we mean by dynamic analysis. So dynamic, it's the business, plus also the markets. Everything moves now properly over time. So then let's do it in Excel. So that's the thing. But Excel is very limited. Excel in reality is 2 dimensions. Yeah, you can smuggle in other dimensions like another sheet, but the control is impossible. Even within one sheet becomes pretty complex. The guy who does it remembers it this year, not next year. A new guy coming, very difficult. Everything is hidden in formula. The problem with this 2 dimension is in one cell you can express exactly one number. It's either a function which returns a number or it's a number directly. That's all you can do. But financial business cannot be described with a single number. We will see it even better as I talk on. This kind of simulation works for only if this number represents a homogeneous mass, like current accounts. In current accounts, everything changes for all at the same time. So then it works. Then it works. But as soon as you have different conditions, which then different over time, it does not work. We have this case. Let's say we are in T0 again. And now I don't look at the entire balance sheet, just at loans. But the balance sheet is made up of loans and everything. So I look at the section of it. And what do you have there? Let's say we have 3 loans or more. Just I show you 3. The green one, from some history, it will end in 2. The blue one, B, will go up to step N somewhere. But it will have a rate reset, this little point. I want to indicate there's something happening on the way of that contract. C equally goes up to period 4, let's say, but also will have some change. Something will happen. These risk parts, which Francis was talking about, some interaction with the external world. So if you do static analysis, that's it. If you do dynamic analysis, the time comes in a second time. So time is 2 times the dimension. Actually, they overlap. It's not even like that. It's like that. So they are on the same time. And what you're doing there, you do now, again, in every step in the future time, you do actions over time. So that's how it is. You have like an orange thing, which starts in after 1 and goes up to maybe a few quarters. Then the blue one, again, starts later, has an action somewhere thing and goes on and on and on, and the yellow one. So if you do now analysis in 1, let's say that's still the same in the step short here. like we had in T0. But if you are in step 2, the orange ones is added to it. And the blue one has had an action in between. Something has changed already. So that is in step 3, the green one drops off, the blue one stays the same, red has a change, and we have an additional one, blue one on and in step 4 and so on. So that makes it so difficult. So the time dimension kicks in twice. And that's why Excel with a single number is not representable. So financial contracts carry their conditions inherited somewhere in the past into the future. They might update their condition, and the balance sheet reflects at any point in time a conglomerate of all these conditions. So a single number cannot do that. By the way, that's in all businesses the case. But in finance, it's most prominent and it's most clear. And in finance, it's easiest to calculate, I must say. Let's hope I can show that yet. So now another question, are we forecasting the business or the balance sheet? And I want to make a little detour outside finance just to make the point. And let's think about what we are really forecasting. And I'm going to the business of the car business. Now, if you are a car producer and you make forecasts, what are you forecasting? I think the very first thing to a normal car producer is the car. You should think about the car. So, okay, what does it mean? You have a certain number of cars produced, the employees you need on different levels, salaries paid for each level, the cost of the main production sites, the number of units of physical input, the price of that physical input, that goes into the model here. Plus then the expected number of sold cars and the price of those cars. So that is, and what you get as output is first cash flow, and then you get the P&L most likely, and then a balance sheet. That's basically probably how it works. So cash flow, then the P&L, then the balance sheet derived. Now, how is it in finance? What are we producing in finance? We hear these cash flows, cash flow. But what are cash flows? Did you ever observe a cash flow? Now, really, not it's a flow, but not like water. Water we can see how it flows. The cash flow, it pumps in computers. It's just somewhere in the big. It blimps here. Where do you see it? You see it in the balance sheet. Or in the liquidity statement. So that's why we are so much hooked on that idea of balance sheet. So all finance starts with value, it starts with balance sheet and all that. And I think that's really the problem. So if you start with the balance sheet, you really jump the gun because the balance sheet is the outcome. So we have to look about what is the input. And I come back, I think the same slide Alan's already showed, but it's good to repeat here. So a bank, what is then the product? What is the cars of the bank? And the cars are the financial contracts. That's what they produce. So they issue a financial contract, they manage the life cycle of these contracts, they buy and sell it, and they look at it and analyze it. That's basically, so the production of finance is the financial contract here. So that is what we have to focus on. Now, the financial contract has some beautiful features, really makes them unique and makes it actually that finance should be the easiest business in the world. Sorry, it's not that. We managed to make it very complicated. And we managed to make it complicated exactly because we did not focus on these things. We focused on the balance sheet and we stumbled back to the fact of the business. And that creates the chaos which we have. So what are the nice features of financial contracts? First of all, what do we exchange? In normal business, I give you money and you give me a good. You give me a car. You give me a house. You give me something. In finance, I give you money. What do you give me back? Money. So we exchange money. I give you money, you give me money. So that's the first thing. Now, and money, these are cash flows or payments. These are units of account. And these are pure numbers. Actually, what we should move around are numbers, nothing else. The sequence of these numbers, like in a financial contract, these are algorithms. I give you, and there is already known how you have to give me back. Actually, the financial contract is the only contract where investment and return is in the same contract. If you buy a machinery to build for your business, nobody promises you cash flow back. They promise you to produce. And the cash flow comes then via here the investment and the return is the same here, and it's a mathematical function. It's made for the computer. And the final beauty is there are very few. It's a limited number of exchanges which make up almost everything. You always can create a new one, a crazy one, for sure. But what is relevant, actually, if you look at it in the reality of notional, I think about 60–70% is a handful of contract types, a half a dozen, I say. That's all. And in ACTUS, we have 32 defined. So to get the crazy ones quite far. So these are the contract types ACTUS has created here. And those who know ACTUS a little bit, they know the PAM and the under. These are the on-balance sheet stuff here on the left side. Principal at maturity, annuity here. And of course, what we define is not only the data, but we define the algorithm which generate those patterns, basically. These are the cash flow patterns, and the graph shows it actually even in a balance sheet representation. And what you see on the right, these are all the payments, all the obligations, and this is rock bottom of finance. This is the string level of finance. There's nothing below. And if a physicist tells me, okay, there's the string level, it's the last thing. Okay, I believe it. How can I argue? But I could have some doubts. Here I can be sure. Why can I be sure? Because it's a human-made system. We created it. We defined, I told you to give you so much on that date. You understand you will receive so much on that date. So that's understandable. And everything derives from this. And what also Alan said, transaction processing, analysis, anything of interest is there. So this is a thing. So now we come to dynamic simulation. So how do you do that? That you will see after lunch. You will see a real case. So here, so the input is now, what are our cars? It's the contracts. So this is the business. And how do we extract now contracts with ACTUS? In contract types, in PAM, in these patterns. Now we can say, okay, the volume is the scaling, whether you have a lot of it or little, and then the relationship to the price. That is part of ACTUS. And that's also what Francis has been talking about, the relationship to the risk factor. Then we forecast the yield curves, the stock index, the market conditions. That is now an assumption, and that's model in the true sense. No single opinion there. And then what we shouldn't forget is the operational cost, like salaries, premises, and IT. So this is the input. And then what you get as output is cash flow. That's first, of course. That's actually cash flow is the only reality which is there. Everything is a derivation. Then you have a balance sheet. And remember that S there, number, because it's a question of valuation, how you value that. Cash flow is one. There's no S. Okay, there are many cash flows, but one sequence, and balance sheets and P&Ls. And then any other further derivation from that. It all goes back to these elements. Now, what is type of business? So that's the thing. So we call these business loan, mortgages, saving, leasing, term deposit swaps, etc. And they turn nicely into ACTUS contract types. Okay, this is a PAM, this is a NUN, this is a UMP, and so this is just short form for this type of financial contract. And behind PAM, we have something like that. That's a principal and maturity, the pays back. Behind AN, we have this pattern, and behind others, we have other patterns. And so now we can talk in dynamic simulation with these things. We can create this pattern for me. I don't say just 100. No, 100 has no meaning in bonds. It's hundreds and this whole thing which is in the background. And now we look at, again, a single part of the business, let's say mortgages this time. So we have mortgages, and what we see, let's say this is the nominal value and time. here. And we see how it runs off over time here. That's the existing business. Huh? So that's what we know, that's certain. And then we need some intervals. Huh? So where do we focus? Monthly, quarterly, whatever we need here. So we also need this, the markets. We need the markets. Or maybe let's put yeah, so we need the markets. And then the green line is the volume. That's the forecast. Huh? So I had 100 mortgages now. In terms of nominal value, I want to have 120, whatever, in the next interval here. So what we have to do now is to calculate this area. So that's the integral of all that stuff here. And then now we say type of business. So type of business. And that says, okay, I'm creating the business as much as this yellow area, and it is in terms of business annuity. It's an. With this, I create the whole stream, so that the whole cash flow stream with very few input actually. And then we have yet a relationship to the pricing, which is saying, okay, that will be the spread. It goes to the yield curve. It picks the correct term. It adds the spread, puts it into the contract. And now all cash flows are known. Everything can be, ACTUS knows the annuity formula, all that stuff. So it knows all that. And now all the cash flow is created. And if you go to period 2, of course, now we have the up there a little yellow, down there a little yellow. You calculate all these areas, and you fill in this, and so on, and so on, and so on. And at any point in time now, I can draw a balance sheet with the correct values. And I say again, I can have multiple valuations in parallel because I know the cash flows. Any value is derived from the cash flow. So I know the rule and so on. Of course, that's ACTUS Plus. ACTUS only knows the cash flow. So you have to add these rules on top. So that's how it is. So we derive cash flows, balance sheets, P&L statement, and any further derivations such as sensitivity, risk, etc. At any future time, under any valuation rule, under any scenario. That's how it is. So now coming to the forecast in practice. So we will have now a lunch break, and that will happen after lunch. I think it will be a very interesting case. It is a forecast of long-term balance sheet of pension funds. So for pension funds, the future is very important. You can't do static analysis, doesn't matter. Whether a little fluctuation today, do you survive 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? That's the question, actually, 20 years, 30 years here. And so we will understand much better how ACTUS makes it possible to talk in terms of contracts. I can say, create a contract, and that is a pattern. It's almost like an animal crawling through time and leaving cash flows in the background. And then from there, any information can be. And it will reduce the complexity drastically. There was a question before about this mapping. Yes, that will not be cheap, but I call it the last great mapping. Because the last, you map everything into this and you do all the analysis.
Let me frame that for you real quick.
Willi,
Excellent.
because there's statistically, for each employee in a bank, there's an application for each 100 employees in a bank. So you take a big bank, you got 15,000 applications. Each one of those has a data model, a glossary, nuances, context that have to be considered. The problem that we have to do is the start of the chain to get it into ACTUS is to make sure that all of that stuff can be mapped using data standards.
Exactly, but it's not the application which makes the problem, it's the source data. And that's also not a small number. A big bank has easily 100 systems, something like that. So that creates the thing, but it's doable. I have done it so many times. You know, I mean, of course, it's good for consultants, by the way. It's a good thing, yeah. And you can
It's a
really,
completely solvable problem. like
yeah,
all
it's
risk.
absolutely, and it's the cheapest way. You get rid of so many reconciliation problems, all that stuff. You know, you save money. I think the payback is less than 1 year if you really. Yeah,
40% of your IT budget is in it.
George.
In connection with the last talk, it seems to be important, from my perspective at least, to point out that ACTUS isn't just for risk analysis. What you've shown is that ACTUS is a behavioral model, and the kinds of data that it uses, namely cash flows, not only allow you to model the behavior of the institution, but the behavior of the links between all of the institutions. So that ACTUS is like a simple version of a general ecology model of an ecological system where the granular data and the algorithms are like energy in a general ecological model. It allows you, using the same kind of methods and the same kind of numbers, to do not only institutional analysis and do day-to-day kind of business learning, but also to understand the financial system ultimately in terms of the way all of those interactions. And this is basically because ACTUS is basically mathematically a representation of category theory inside of mathematics, inside of finance. So that's why that works.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you can do systemic risk without ACTUS.
Right. I mean, but
It's all flowing around.
That's
You
why I
know.
say it's important to think of this as a behavioral model, which ties in with the more discussions we had earlier. You not only learn risk analysis, but you learn more details and different details about the way your institution is actually working. Which is, by the way, I know from having dealt with something that nobody
Yeah. I think it's time for lunch now, and thank you very much. And come back at time. I think it will be interesting.